So this is the first session of a three-part series called The Future We All See. This one is focused on economic systems. The concept was developed by both ends because they believe that visions and practices of a fair, inclusive and sustainable world are not only urgently needed, but already exist. Welcome to this former bank building in Utrecht. Very happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. Good evening, all of you, the students there. I can't see you, but I'm very, very happy to be here. The current economic system is not working for the majority of the people and the environment. But we need to remember that it's working for a few people and especially the corporations, the big corporations like the pharmaceuticals, the petroleum companies. This current economic system has led to the impoverishment of the majority of the people, especially the small-scale producers in Africa. I will talk about Africa. This is where I am. This is where I come from. I will give an example of Ghana and Ivory Coast. Ghana and Ivory Coast account for about 2/3 of global cocoa production. Yet, both countries, Ghana and Ivory Coast, together with their small-scale producers, earn less than 6% of revenues in the chocolate industry, which is valued at more than 100 billion per year. 6% of 100 billion per year. I want that to sink in. And this scenario of cocoa is also replicated in other commodities like coffee, palm oil, cashew nuts. That's how it is in Africa. Just getting a little portion of the entire industry. And because of the unfair trade policies, many African countries are exporting primary commodities like coffee, cocoa, tea, and importing value-added products. Therefore, many African countries have very high import bills and have to borrow to make ends meet because they are not earning from what they are producing. Therefore, you find most of the countries now in Africa are in a debt crisis. The size of Ugandan debt is twice its annual budget. The annual budget which goes to health care, combine it with a budget to education, to agriculture, that budget is less than the amount of money we spend on debt servicing.
Thank you, Jane. I'm moving to our other speaker, so you can take a small break. Vinne, from your perspective, why is the current economic system not working?
All of the inequalities that we're seeing, the rise in inequality, as well as the climate crisis, they are systemically, or economic system is organized in such a way that these are the causes of that system. So, for example, the economist Kate Raworth, she speaks about our current economy being divisive and degenerative by design. So it's a design choice. And I think this is very important because we realize then that the economy is a construct, right? It's a political choice. It's not something that is the effect of natural laws of the market, whatever that may be. So as soon as we politicize that and we see it as a construct, we can also realize we can deconstruct it, right? And that this is something that we have in our hands. But concretely, I think one of the examples, recently Oxfam reported that the last decade, all of the wealth that was created during the past decade, half of that ended up at the 1%. so the richest 1%. I started to get very inspired and become active in the degrowth movement, which is a movement that and a narrative that basically starts with criticizing an economy that's centered around growth, and that criticizes this vision of progress that's defined by some kind of capitalist growth idea, and argues that rich countries in the north, who are, as we know, disproportionately responsible for the climate crisis, are the ones that should kind of go onto some kind of macroeconomic diet, as some people would say. So they have overshoot planetary boundaries, and they've taken an unfair share of the resources that our planet provides, as well as the labor. And so those countries should actively scale down their resource and energy use, and instead they should organize their economy around provisioning for human needs while reducing inequality instead. New economic thinkers, they point towards what we call the commons. So it's this domain in the economy where people are collectively providing for their needs with very little reliance on the market or the state. So think of energy co-ops or food co-ops or housing collectives. So it's kind of a domain which is non-marketized, and it's not tradable, but it's focused on provisioning for needs. And so these are the parts of the economy that are still happening, that we know that exist today still in our current capitalist economies, but and that should be expanded in the economy of the future. They should be actively promoted.
Thank you. Welcome back, Jane. I would like to ask you how you see an economy that truly serves the well-being of all the people and the planet.
An economy that truly serves the well-being of all the people and the planet should have that goal reflected in its ideology, its policies, and its regulatory frameworks, which underpins that economy. The goal of the new alternative economic system must be the promotion of a just and inclusive society, and it must prioritize and promote the well-being of all the people and the planet based on the principles of social justice. Like I pointed out, in Africa, we give 30% of our total collection, annual collection, to service our debt. Yet, the IMF and World Bank are telling us that our debt is sustainable. Why are they telling us this? They are telling us our debt is sustainable because they use figures of GDP, that's gross domestic product, and gross national product. They make some calculations and they tell us, no, you're okay. But what we are saying is that if an economy is to work for the people, the measurement of the well-being of that economy must be to put the people and the planet at the center. So the measurement should be the well-being of the people. Are the people accessing clean water? Do people have decent jobs? Do people access quality education? Is the environment okay? Those should be the parameters to be able to gauge whether the economy is working or not. There are efforts in place, by the way, at all levels to challenge the power relations, to be able to change this system. And I want to give an example, an example in Uganda. In the areas of investment, many of our countries in Africa have continued to attract foreign direct investment, to create jobs, to bring technology. However, most of our investment policies are promoting the rights of the investors at the expense of the rights of the communities and the environment. Recently in Uganda, in Tanzania, and in Burkina Faso, Siatini worked together with both ends to request Netherlands, in fact, we requested the Netherlands to renegotiate our bilateral investment treaty. And this was the first time that an African country is requesting a developed country to renegotiate a bilateral investment treaty.
Okay, so big question. I think so the degrowth movement basically says a lot of things need to happen. If we look at what needs to happen nationally at rich countries like the Netherlands, first and foremost, if we think of how to scale down resource and energy use, we need to think of what sectors in the economy are clearly taking up a lot of resources and are not necessary for our societal well-being, starting, of course, with the fossil industry. But also think of all other forms of production that are clearly not needed. So SUVs, planned obsolescence, fast fashion, industrial beef. You can think of, I think we can have a democratic discussion about what sectors we need and what sectors we don't. As we do so, it's important to realize that as certain sectors will stop growing, the economy as a whole will also create different. We'll see a different trend, right? So GDP might not be going up anymore. Now, in a capitalist society, this is a problem because capitalism is structurally dependent and organized around economic growth. We need to think of how to distribute the wealth that we have and make the system basically independent from growth. So we will have to rethink how we currently organize social security. Do we want our income and our financial stability to be dependent on ever rising levels of, or an ever kind of growing market of where we can work in, so a growing labor market? Or do we want to think of different ways to provide people with the things that they need to live well? And so, for example, the degrowth movement relies heavily on things like a shortening of the work week, or something like a UBI, so universal basic income. So these are two kind of things that we can, in the long run, think of how to organize social security and how to make sure that people have access to the things they need without needing an economy that constantly needs to expand and therefore having to put more and more pressure on the environment and people elsewhere.
Jane, shifting back to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Evelyn. I think it's really important for all of us to appreciate that the current system is not working. And for me, I think that's the beginning place, that it's not working. And I think there is also a very urgent need to have a deep analysis of the reasons why this current system is not working. Without this analysis, we might end up addressing the symptoms rather than the root causes of the current crisis. I can give an example, the symptoms. Sometimes people say, hey, Africa, you are poor because your leaders are corrupt. Those are symptoms of a deeper problem. And my vision is, first of all, to see that the debate for the alternative economic system is spreading. Because today, this debate around an alternative economic system is among very few people, especially civil society organizations. But I would love to see it spreading to the academia, and I'm happy the academia is here, the private sector, policymakers, government, and also multilateral institutions. The academia is key to propagate new ideas and theories. And I think for me, the academia is an important ally in the quest for an alternative economic system. Briefly, at international level, the global community, especially the international institutions like the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, the United Nations, must also ensure that the current trade, financial, and debt architecture are reformed to address the current challenges. So what I'm saying really, that each one of us and the institutions should play its role in ensuring that the alternative becomes really the mainstream. For me, I think if we can be able to do that, even at our own personal level, looking at our consumption, doing those small steps, the alternative will become the mainstream. Thank you.
We're discussing pretty big changes here, is to change the current narrative, the common story that we are used to tell ourselves and each other. So how do you get a new or a difficult message across, like what we're talking about here? And so we have two extra guests for you, Martijn Houtkamp and Rinus de Recht. And they're both students at the Master of Education in Arts here in Utrecht, but also teachers, graphic designers and illustrators. And they have taken the initiative to use their talents as graphic designers to tell stories and use a sense of humor to create a new optimist narrative around the changes that are necessary. For example, about existential economics. And can I ask you, why do you do this?
I want to do something good in this world. And then we came to the book Existential Economics by Kees Klomp, betekeniseconomie. And I really liked what I read about it, but I thought, well, it's almost impossible to tell this to my students. So I decided to make like a cartoon, like a storybook about, to tell the story about it.
Wow. Yeah, and well, obviously we don't have any other talents, so yeah, drawing is the only way.
Yeah. Use the tools that you have, right?
Yeah.
Jane, we're moving to question number 4, and I'm hoping we can find you back on the screen. And the next question is, what would you like to ask or to give to the younger generation, the students here in this room? What can they do? How can they harness their talent to make this new economy a reality?
The students, I can't see them, but I know they are there. You are the next policymakers. You are the policymakers in the making. You are going to be the next presidents, the next members of parliament, but also the next activists like we. So it's important that you understand and appreciate these issues, especially the issue of the urgent need for an alternative economic system. You should interest yourselves in understanding why the current economic system is causing inequalities, impoverishment, climate crisis, and other problems. You should debate these issues, debate the possible solutions, have an inquisitive mind. There is a gentleman who talked about buying locally, buying, things from locally within the community. Those are some of the solutions we should be looking at, because they are providing employment, they are providing income to communities. Another suggestion is that you should form student associations if you don't have them. This will help you to debate these issues further through organizing public dialogues like this one, engaging various people, including policymakers at all levels. For us in Uganda, as Siatini, We work closely with Students Association, and we have found it really interesting, so that, we bridge the generational gap, the students and we, the activists and the older generation. You can be able to invite people from organizations like now Both Ends. There is also a very good organization working on data in Europe called Eurodad, TNI. You can be able to invite us as Siatini and other local organizations for discussions. And it's also very important that you hear the voices of the people. Let us get out of the ivory tower, the universities. Let us bring the people on board, the farmers, the producers, the small-scale producers. Let us bring them on board, and we hear their voices. With internet and Zoom, it is not very difficult to bring those people on board. For Siatini, we can be able to provide information, and we also provide, by the way, opportunities for internship. So it's also good for students there if they can be able to come to Uganda to do their research, their internship. But lastly, what I want to remind ourselves that the current economic system is man-made. It's made through policy choices. And for us in Africa, they started, IMF and World Bank, they started telling us about these issues of structured, liberalize, privatize in the late 90s. That's when we started all these neoliberal policies. We privatized our institutions, we liberalized, and this is where we are, very disastrous situation. Therefore, if the current economic system was man-made, then it can be dismantled and alternative policies put in place. And I want to leave you with two references. One, Susan George, she wrote a book on a short history of neoliberalism. And that book is very interesting because it shows that neoliberalism, the idea started in universities. So for me, I have hope that these debates in universities, we can start a movement to have an alternative development system. Another book is by Eric Reinert. He wrote a book on how rich countries got rich and why poor countries stay poor. Very, very interesting book. But lastly, Evelyn, what I want to leave with our students is that we can redesign an equitable, workable economic system. Thank you very much.
Vinne, the same question to you. This audience that came here to learn, to understand more, to grow, what would you suggest they could do?
Sticking to individual behavior change. It's not only mentally draining, but it's also inadequate if we are to change societal structures, right? So we need...
It's a good start, but it's not good enough.
It's not good enough. It's not something that will tackle the system. For that, we need collective action. And that will be a struggle, because the current economy is a representation of power and interest. And so we'll have to fight those structures that represent current power and interest dynamics. And so come to the A12 on Saturday, definitely, but also talk to each other, support each other in imagining how our streets or neighborhoods or workplaces or universities could look like if they were organized around different principles, different values, if they weren't capitalist. I think this imagination is something that we should do collectively and not something individually. Yes, we should read books, but then debate about these books and talk about what you learned and do that collectively, because this is, I think, the only way to stay sane, first of all, but also the only way to actually change the system is, it has always been done through collective action, right? In the past, changing the world has always been through people getting together, through building movements and through creating alliances. So I think this is what really gives me hope as well. That really the only thing that has ever changed something is small groups of people that would join or create a student force, and we are with way more than the small minority that is currently benefiting from the status quo.
So do not despair, you're not alone in this.
Yes.
And form a movement.
Rise up, stop the violence of toxic industries. Rise up, failing politics are a threat to humanity. Rise up, with people power we build caring communities. Rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up. Rise up, pop the Bibles and take down racist walls. Rise up, fossil companies, every single one must fall. Rise up for climate justice and green jobs and homes for all. Rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up. Rooted as a tree we stand united, with women leading the way out of this crisis. We bring the change that's been envisioned behind their eyelids. We rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up. Stop the violence of toxic industries. Rise up, failing politics are a threat to humanity. Rise up, with people power we build caring communities. Rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up. Rise up, pop the Bibles and take down racist walls. Rise up, fossil companies, every single one must fall. Rise up, for climate justice and green jobs and homes for all.